In 1895, a man named Ogden Bolton Jr. patented an electric bicycle design with a battery and a motor in the wheel. That should sound familiar, because the same basic idea still powers many e-bikes today. But that raises one big question. If the blueprint was already there, why did it take more than 100 years for e-bikes to actually work? This was not just a slow march of progress. It was a long cycle of failure. Every few decades, someone tried to bring electric bikes back. And every time, one major problem stopped them. The batteries were too heavy. The range was too short. The motors were not good enough. The price was too high. And most people still saw bicycles as toys, not real transport. Then, something changed. New batteries got lighter. Motors got smarter. Cities got crowded. Gas got expensive. And suddenly, the old idea became useful again. So let's look at why e-bikes failed for a century before finally taking over. Let's start with the first killer, the battery problem that haunted electric vehicles for over a century. When Ogden Bolton filed his patent in 1895, he had one tiny problem. The batteries he needed to power his electric bicycle did not actually exist yet. The lead-acid batteries available at the time weighed more than the bicycle itself. Imagine strapping a car battery to your bike frame and trying to pedal up a hill. That is essentially what early electric bicycle pioneers were attempting. But here is the thing. Bolton was not some crazy inventor working alone in his garage. Electric vehicles were actually winning the transportation race in the 1890s. The Pope Manufacturing Company in Hartford, Connecticut was building traditional bicycles and electric carriages that wealthy Americans were buying for weekend drives through Central Park. Electric carriages outnumbered gasoline cars on the streets of New York City. The future looked electric, until it did not. The problem was energy density. Those massive lead-acid battery packs could store about 25 watt-hours per kilogram. To put that in perspective, the lithium-ion battery in a modern e-bike stores about 150 watt-hours per kilogram. 6 times more energy in the same weight. So early electric bicycle riders had a brutal choice. They could carry enough batteries to go maybe 10 miles, or they could carry so many batteries that the bike became impossible to pedal when the motor died. Most chose option 3. They bought a regular bicycle instead. By 1900, the electric bicycle was already becoming a curiosity. Rich people's toys gathering dust in carriage houses across America. The technology worked in theory, but physics killed it in practice. And just when battery technology started improving in the 1920s, the second killer emerged: World War. The 1940s should have been the electric bicycle's moment. Gasoline was rationed. Rubber for tires was nearly impossible to find. European cities were bombed to rubble, making cars impractical anyway. People needed efficient, quiet transportation that did not rely on scarce wartime resources. Electric bicycles were perfect for the job, and they knew it. In reality, the global conflict completely halted consumer innovation, putting the electric bicycle on an indefinite pause. Civilian factories went silent. Global supply chains were locked down for military production. You could not easily source raw materials, acquire copper wire, or secure funding without military backing. But here is what killed the electric bicycle renaissance before it could begin. Every piece of technology that could improve electric bicycles was being redirected to the war effort. Copper for motors went to aircraft wiring. Advanced battery chemistry went to submarine technology. Engineers who might have solved the weight problem were designing radar systems and jet engines instead. The war did not just delay electric bicycle development. It created the conditions that would make them irrelevant for the next 50 years. Because when the war ended, 2 things happened that buried electric bicycles for decades. First, gasoline became cheap and abundant again. Second, American culture fell in love with the automobile. This brings us to the third killer: oil culture. Picture suburban America in 1955. Eisenhower is building the interstate highway system. Every new house comes with a two-car garage. Gas costs 23 cents a gallon. The average American family is buying their first television, their first washing machine, and their second car. In this world, electric bicycles were not just impractical, they were obsolete. Riding a bicycle to work meant you could not afford a car. Adding a motor to that bicycle just highlighted your poverty. Real Americans drove to the corner store. Real Americans had tail fins and chrome bumpers and V8 engines. Electric bicycles were for kids, eccentrics, and Europeans. Meanwhile, the few companies still trying to build electric bicycles faced an impossible economics problem. Car manufacturers were producing millions of vehicles per year, driving down costs through massive economies of scale. Electric bicycle makers were building dozens of units in small workshops, making each bike prohibitively expensive. A decent electric bicycle in 1960 cost more than a used car. And the car could go farther, carry more, and would not leave you stranded when the batteries died. So electric bicycles survived only in tiny niches. Postal workers in a few European cities, factory workers in communist countries where car ownership was restricted, elderly riders who could not pedal regular bicycles anymore. The technology was getting better. Nickel-cadmium batteries offered twice the energy density of lead-acid. Electric motors were becoming more efficient. But it did not matter. The market had moved on. Until 1993, when everything changed in the most unlikely place imaginable. Japan was the last country where you would expect an electric bicycle revolution. Japanese cities were dense and bicycle-friendly. Public transportation was world-class. Gas was expensive, but so was everything else. Most Japanese commuters were already using regular bicycles or electric trains. But Yamaha saw something nobody else did. They realized that Japan's aging population was creating a perfect storm of demand for electric assistance. Elderly Japanese riders wanted to keep cycling to work and to the market, but they could not handle the hills anymore. The traditional bicycle was aging out along with its riders. Yamaha's solution was brilliant in its simplicity. The PAS system, launched in 1993, did not try to replace human pedaling. It amplified it. The motor only engaged when the rider was already pedaling, and it provided just enough assistance to flatten the hills. This solved two problems at once. First, it eliminated range anxiety. If the battery died, you could still pedal home. Second, it preserved the bicycle experience. You were still exercising, still feeling connected to the road, just with a little help when you needed it. But here is the real breakthrough. Yamaha figured out the economics. Instead of trying to build a cheap electric bicycle, they built an expensive bicycle that felt worth its premium price. Japanese consumers were willing to pay for quality, craftsmanship, and innovation. The PAS system was not competing with cars or motorcycles. It was competing with premium regular bicycles and winning. Within 5 years, electric bicycles were everywhere in Japan. Mothers were using them to carry children to school. Elderly riders were commuting to part-time jobs. Delivery workers were zipping through Tokyo traffic with heavy cargo loads. The rest of the world barely noticed. American and European bicycle manufacturers dismissed electric bicycles as another weird Japanese gadget, like karaoke machines or tiny pickup trucks. They had no idea they were watching the future, but Japan had only solved half the puzzle. The motor technology was finally good enough and the market was finally ready. But the batteries were still holding everything back. That is where the fourth obstacle lived. And it took another technological revolution to break through it. The lithium-ion battery that powers your smartphone also powers your e-bike, and that is not a coincidence. The same revolution that made smartphones possible made electric bicycles practical for the first time in history. Before lithium-ion, electric bicycles were still carrying around the descendants of car batteries. Nickel metal hydride was better than lead acid, but not by much. A decent range still required a battery pack that weighed as much as the bicycle frame. But lithium-ion changed everything. Sony commercialized the technology in 1991 for camcorders, but the real breakthrough came in the 2000s when manufacturing costs plummeted due to demand from laptop computers and cell phones. Suddenly, electric bicycle makers could buy the same battery cells that Dell was putting in laptops and Apple was putting in iPods. The economies of scale that had always worked against electric bicycles were finally working for them. A modern lithium-ion battery pack weighs about 6 pounds and can push an electric bicycle 40 miles on a single charge. That same range in 1993 would have required a 30-pound nickel-cadmium battery that cost 3 times as much. But even perfect batteries were not enough. Electric bicycles were still fighting a perception problem in most of the world. They were still seen as niche novelties, entirely dismissed by the broader public. That perception survived until the fifth and final obstacle fell: the tech industry boom. Here is how the booming tech industry ultimately legitimized the electric bicycle. When smartphones became ubiquitous in the 2010s, they did not just change how we communicate. They completely transformed global investment strategies. Before the tech boom, building an electric bicycle was seen as a niche, highly unprofitable manufacturing challenge. After the tech boom, digital integration made the e-bike an incredibly lucrative platform. The same consumers who had ignored traditional bicycles were now engaging with connected devices. Suddenly, an electric motor and battery pack did not just make a bicycle functional, it made it highly investable. The tech sector's influence also solved the user interface problem that had plagued electric bicycles for decades. Instead of confusing control panels with cryptic buttons and LED displays, modern e-bikes seamlessly connect to digital apps. You can monitor battery levels, adjust assistance levels, track your route, and even locate your bike if it gets stolen. But the real breakthrough was financial. The massive influx of Silicon Valley capital allowed new mobility brands to rapidly scale their operations. Electric assistance was not just a gimmick anymore. It was fundamentally repositioned as a smart transportation solution, perfectly aligned with modern urban infrastructure and digital connectivity. This financial shift unlocked the final piece of the puzzle: investment. When venture capitalists started seeing electric bicycles as tech companies instead of bicycle companies, everything changed. Startups like VanMoof and Rad Power Bikes raised hundreds of millions of dollars to build e-bikes with the same development budgets and marketing spend that tech companies used. Traditional bicycle companies were forced to respond. Trek, Specialized and Giant started treating electric bicycles as their premium product lines instead of awkward side projects. Quality went up. Prices came down. Selection exploded. By 2015, all 5 obstacles had finally been eliminated. Battery technology was good enough. Motor technology was refined. Manufacturing costs were reasonable. Financial backing was secured. And investment capital was pouring in. The electric bicycle that took 130 years to work suddenly worked everywhere, all at once. But wait, there's a twist to this story that most people miss. The electric bicycle did not just finally work. It got so successful that it created a new problem nobody saw coming. In 2024, cities around the world started treating electric bicycles like cars instead of bicycles. Speed limits, license requirements, registration fees, insurance mandates. The very success that proved electric bicycles had finally overcome their technical obstacles created new regulatory obstacles. And here is the ironic proof that electric bicycles have truly arrived. When governments start regulating something, it means they are taking it seriously as real infrastructure instead of dismissing it as a novelty. The same city planners who ignored electric bicycles for decades are now scrambling to figure out where to put charging stations, how to manage bike share programs, and whether e-bikes should be allowed in bike lanes alongside traditional bicycles. But this is where the story gets complicated. The e-bike did not just become popular with commuters. It became popular with delivery riders, students, parents, older cyclists, and people who had not touched a regular bike in years. That changed the streets fast. Suddenly, bike lanes were not only carrying slow weekend riders, they were carrying cargo e-bikes, throttle bikes, shared rental bikes, and commuters moving at car-like speeds through crowded city blocks. That forced cities to ask questions they had avoided for years. Is an e-bike still a bicycle if it can keep up with traffic? Should a heavy cargo bike share the same lane as a child on a normal bike? What happens when delivery riders depend on speed to make a living, but pedestrians feel less safe crossing the street? This regulatory attention is actually the final validation that the 100-year struggle is over. Electric bicycles are not fighting for survival anymore. They are fighting for space. Every e-bike you see on the road today carries the DNA of Ogden Bolton Jr.'s 1895 patent. The hub motor, the battery pack, the simple idea that electricity can amplify human power instead of replacing it. But it took 5 technological and cultural revolutions to make his vision practical. The battery revolution gave us energy density. The motor revolution gave us efficiency and reliability. The manufacturing revolution gave us economies of scale. The tech revolution gave us connectivity. And the investment revolution gave us the capital to solve all the remaining problems at once. That is why it took 100 years for e-bikes to work. Not because the technology was impossible, but because all 5 pieces of the puzzle had to fall into place at the same time. And they finally did, sometime around 2015. If you are riding an e-bike today, you are not just using a bicycle with a motor. You are riding the final solution to a century-old engineering challenge that defeated some of the smartest inventors in history. And the best part? This is still just the beginning. The obstacles that took 100 years to solve were only the first wave. Now the second wave is already forming. Better batteries, safer chargers, smarter theft protection, lighter motors, stronger cargo frames, software that can limit speed by location, cities that may one day build lanes made for small electric vehicles, not just old-style bicycles. That is the next battle, not whether e-bikes work. They already do. The question now is how much of the transportation system gets rebuilt around them. Ogden Bolton Jr. solved the easy part back in 1895. He figured out how to put a motor on a bicycle. It only took us 130 years to figure out how to make it actually work. The next 100 years are going to be even more interesting.